Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of I Am I. Church bells are ringing. I tried to catch that real quick. I hope this is set up right, but I was like, oh, I gotta get the church bells in. Amen. Okay. So, welcome back to another episode of Follow Flag. Totally prepared, totally ready. Me, ra. What to do to die today, a minute or two to two. A thing distinctly hard to say, but harder still to do. For the beat a tattoo at 22 with a rat-a-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat, and the dragon will come when he hears the drum at a minute or two till two today. A minute or two till two. Okay. Edit point. So, today we're moving along in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. We're moving along in the niyamas, which are the second limb of yoga in Ashtanga yoga. Again, Ashtanga yoga being the 8 limbs, literally means 8 limbs. And the Ashtanga yoga of Patanjali, not the modern day Ashtanga yoga, which is a physical practice, which is just, again, borrowed. The name is borrowed to give it some, integrity. It's kind of like, yeah, that sounds legit. It has this ancient thing, this idea to it. And there's also kind of a brilliant marketing thing because it gives it a confusion. It's like, what is it? Ashtanga yoga? That's serious. That's a legit ancient thing. It's not. So, the ancient thing, the Ashtanga yoga of Patanjali. The first limb was the yamas, right? How we relate to the rest of the world, right? The things that we want to avoid doing, having mastery over these things. And then the second limb has been the niyamas, which are the things that we want to do, the observances that we want to take, and it's really how we relate to ourselves, right? So the first one was saucha, purity, cleanliness, and we discussed that in all its not obvious ways. And then we discussed santosha, which is contentment, right? And then we discussed last week tapas, austerity, and heat, self-discipline, right? And how that burns off the things that we don't need. And then this week we are settling into Svadhyaya, right? Svadhyaya. So it's kind of interesting because Svadhyaya, okay, I'm going to, discuss this a little bit in different ways, and people have different interpretations of it, and of course there would be people that would be like, that's incorrect, and they would be right in certain mindsets. But really the whole practice here is about getting to a higher space of life, right? Whatever that means to you. If it's getting to samadhi, right, which is literally the goal of yoga, of this particular yoga, of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, which is one aspect of what we consider this huge umbrella of yoga, right? And it is one of the 6 darshans, the 6 visions of Hindu life, right? The 6 orthodox, the Astika of the Astika philosophies, right? So this is yoga, which is one of them. And the goal of that would be samadhi, which is, liberation. Well, it's union with this higher life, right? And so, again, I'm mixing and mingling to try to understand from different perspectives. So, this is a sense of self-awareness. What it really means is self-study. It's often interpreted as self-study, right? So that seems to me like the whole practice of yoga is self-study, right? So it means different things. And that's why I love this one, because it is really important. So we're going to break this down. So the first one is understanding, I was talking about it in class today, and actually a student gave me a great suggestion on it, because it was the idea of, I don't want to talk about lower self and higher self. All that happens a lot, right? But I feel like that's an inaccurate understanding of life, to think that this is some sort of base lower thing, because the infinite is present in the finite. In these finite bodies, we see them as finite, but really, if you talk about from a quantum physics perspective, as you get smaller and smaller, it's all relative, right? In this relativity, there is the infinite, right? So you get smaller and smaller and smaller, there's the infinite in these bodies. There's like trillions of cells, and those cells are built up of other, smaller molecules and understanding of building blocks of life and quarks, or whatever you want to fucking say, right? So within this finite, there is the infinite. So I don't like to necessarily consider it the lower, but there is an element of of higher in some sort of space that is subtler, moving into higher. Sometimes it is higher because it's understood to be higher vibrational frequencies and things like that. So as we move into self-study, it's kind of an incorporation of both. So here's where we're going to go with it. I'm going to use the lowercase s self and the uppercase s self, right? Because what we know is this base physical world of what we might consider the lower self, the body, right? And the emotions in our minds and who we think we are. But we don't even fucking know the tip of the iceberg of all that, let alone the capital S self, right? So I'll say traditionally, in the traditional understanding, Svadhyaya means self-study, which really means the study of scripture, which means the study of the capital S self, to understand and know what that higher self is, so that you have some sort of direction that you're moving towards, not just floundering, right? So it means studying the Upanishadic literature and things like that, and studying what we need to do to move towards that space. And so then you could take it into whatever scripture means to you. Traditionally it means the Vedas, right, in this particular philosophy. But if you take it into whatever, it means maybe the Bible, it can mean modern day, it can mean fucking Brene Brown, it could be studying, it's watching these vlogs, whatever it is, it's, self-study. Well, that could be argued, right? Because we're talking about Brene Brown, or even a lot of this vlog. Some of this is mix of that higher self and that lower self. Or the student that talked to me this morning talked to me about the intimate self, or getting, which is an interesting way, because it's the personal self versus the impersonal. I like that one, actually, because it's understanding the personal self versus the impersonal is we can't deny the impersonal. There's some schools that say, yes, get past this impersonal self, that's just ego, and that's the enemy. And it is considered an obstacle, a klesha that we talked about on the spiritual path, is having this ego. But understanding there's a negative ego, and it's not to deny, and some people, again, would say, yes, it is to deny all of this and just descend into something higher, and to deny this personality and all that kind of stuff. Fuck that, personally. But that's just where I'm at on my journey, is that life is meant to be lived from these principles and in a beautiful space, and to reach that higher capital S self, so that we're not missing that. The problem is that we're missing that, and we're stuck in the lower self, and only a small portion of the lower self, and we don't even understand the lower self. So life becomes misery and suffering. If we work on both, right? If we work on understanding that Svadhyaya is study of what the capital S self is, of what it is, this enlightened being and this enlightened space, and the infinite, and study what it is to be in that space, or to know the nature of Atman or Brahman, to know that it is infinite, and it is immovable, unchanging, steady. And again, this is from a Vedantic perspective, but it's in some sort of Vedanta studying means, Vedanta literally translated means the end of knowledge, right? Or it also means the end of knowledge, meaning the end of the Upanishads, which come at the end of the Vedas, and it's the knowledge at the end, right? And that's where that wisdom comes from. The Vedantic philosophy is based mostly on the Upanishads, right? And in the Upanishads, it says the nature of this self, this unmovable, unchanging absolute, right? Which is dangerous when we get into absolutes, because when we get into absolutes without an understanding of what that absolute is, we get into black and whiteness, and it's not black and whiteness. The absolute includes all of the gray. As I always say, the singularity includes the duality, right? So while it is very important to study the nature of the self, and I talk about it, you're absolutely pure and holy and worthy, independent of your actions, whatever actions you have taken or not taken, and all this kind of space, right? That doesn't mean you can just go do whatever the fuck you want. There are consequences for your actions. That's why we have to study all these different principles and bring them together. There is the element of karma. Not that there's some karma, there's some punishment for doing what you haven't done. That's a very remedial or puerile understanding, sophomoric, I should say, understanding of it. Karma is really just a law of cause and effect. And when you start to understand that for every cause there is an effect, and for every effect there is a cause, and that it's cyclical, you just start to become aware of where these causes and effects might be happening or coming from. And start to break that cycle in some way, to rise above that cycle. So, studying also the self-study, I believe, while that is essential because it's a direction to head in, progress, not perfection. Progress is perfection. It's important to study this personal self too, not just the impersonal self, right? This impersonal, let's say universal self is important to understand, but then it's also important to understand your personal self, because while we are all exactly the same and have this divine core that extends and is a unity and includes everything, there is also, not to be fucking stupid and ignorant and deny the duality, which is part of the singularity, right? So the duality is here, and we are different, we are separate, we have this as well, right? And that's where life becomes amazing, when you understand the singularity and bring that into the duality. So to understand how you operate personally, and within that, also understand how the human mechanism as a separate being works, possibly even universally, right? So that's why we have the kleshas. We all understand that we are all ignorant. You are ignorant. If that offends you, that's just your ego, which is the other one, right? So when you understand that you're ignorant and that you have a negative ego that is going to bring you down in the space of only separation and try to keep you separate, then you have your attractions and aversions, all these kleshas. If you don't recognize that that you will be ruled by your likes and dislikes, it doesn't mean you can't go towards what you like, but you'll be ruled by them if you're not, right? If you're not aware of them. And then, because that is the nature of the mind. We're studying the nature of the mind. If we don't understand the nature of the mind, we're just going to be whipped around by it, thinking it's who we are instead of just a tool that we use. And then there's abhinivesha, which is fear. We all have fear. If we don't study and understand the different ways fear shows up, we're going to be fucked and we're going to be ruled by it. If we don't understand that fear shows up as anger, we're going to think we have justifiable anger. It doesn't mean that it's not fucked up what somebody's doing to us, but we're talking about how we are operating this mechanism. We don't even know that the way we're reacting is actually reacting to some sort of, whether it be trauma or some sort of experience that we've had since childhood. We're holding on to so much shit, right? And if we don't know that, then we'll just be whipped around by our experiences in the world as we go out into the world and ruled by our subconscious programming, right? If we don't study and understand this stuff, we're never going to know it. And it still confounds me, because it still shocks me that I can go deeper and deeper and deeper and still be reacting from layers and layers of shit. It's confusing as fuck. That's why we must study, in my opinion, to study this fundamental base, personal or lower self, whatever you want to call it, intimate self, right? So we must study, because while we all have this abhinivesha, this fear, and we have this clinging to life, or all these different kleshas, right? We also understand that we all have different ones, and maybe at different times in our lives. So we have to know our strengths and know our weaknesses. We have to know the nature of fear and anger. We have to know, like I said, if you don't know that anger turned inward leads to depression, you're gonna think you're just depressed and maybe you need a fucking pill, or that you're fucked up. And maybe you do. That's not my fucking problem. You figure that out for yourself. And I don't mean to be an asshole. I just mean like that's what you need to figure out. But a doctor who doesn't know any of this shit is just gonna go, here, take this fucking pill. Maybe you need a pill, maybe you need the pill for help. Finding your own path. This is your own personal path to the impersonal, right? So you have to sift through. But if you don't know that we react from spaces unconsciously, you're fucked. And we're all doing it. We're all doing it. So just trust me that you are, right? Trust me that you are. Trust me. Trust your cult leader. Oh my God, it's such a fucked up ride, this self-study, right? So Svadhyaya, study of the self, right? In many ways. I do believe in studying scripture, but it's not from I take a loose interpretation of it. I'm not a strict constructionalist, right? Because it's just not black and white. It is black and white. It's also a bunch of gray. That's dangerous, because then people think that they just live in the gray and they don't understand that there's also black and white. It's a fucking hell of a ride. But I'm telling you that you're ignorant. So let's not be ignorant. And know that if you think that you're not ignorant, you're ignorant, right? So we have to study the nature of who we are personally. We have to study the nature of the human mechanism as it works, and understand whether that is our human mechanism, because we are all different. There's different body types. We all have different, like I said, there's 4 different types of female pelvises. I don't know if it's pelvises, pelvi. right? So if you don't know that, you're going to be trying to get yourself into a pose where your teacher's like, this is how it is, and he's trying to push you into it, and it's like, it's really not. Or maybe you do need to push a little bit more from a sense of ease. I don't know, right? So it takes a lot of fucking work, right? It takes a lot of work to not work, to get to the space of not working. I could talk for like hours about it, but so that is Svadhyaya, right? On a larger, it really encapsulates the whole practice, right? It really is just self-study, but that's specifically why it's this one little space, because it is really usually traditionally termed study of the scriptures and the study of the larger self, right? But even the scriptures, you know, like if you study the Bhagavad Gita, which is not part of the Vedas, so not traditionally would be considered scripture, but it does break down even psychology. There's spiritual psychology based in there, and ancient psychology and stuff like that, which is studying the human mechanism. So again, studying your personal self, knowing your personal inventory, 12-step, step 4, right? And then understanding the nature of the human mechanism as a whole, right? And as part of that human mechanism, it having that mechanism as the divine core, studying the capital S self as well, Svadhyaya. Boom. In Lakesha Lakin, I am you, you are me. Namaste motherfucking stay, bitches. What? Too much? Oh.